Okay, I did the first one over again because of the interruption I got from the announcements at the library that they had some seminars going on about nutrition, which I was interested in. Anyway, let's go to this website here again, BibleStudyManuals.net, Acts 7, observe.htm, #red_C. And we'll continue on to this fourth segment to examine the population of Israel. Could it really have gotten that large? And the objector and others in the past, many, have insisted that a large group of people could not have successfully crossed the Red Sea, especially with the Egyptians in pursuit. And in going through territories of other countries, they would have gotten all kinds of difficulty. And it just was not feasible, they said. Okay, they had the wrong direction and the wrong area to begin with. The proper name translated Red Seas in Exodus, in most translations, translated Yam Sup. I repeated this before, it means Sea of Reeds, but actually in the Bible it's called Red Sea, and it may have very well been some transliteration, which mountainous, red color of the mountains there. So I just wanted to add that to it. So Red Sea is what the Bible calls it. If that's what the Bible calls it, it's translated into English properly from the ancient Hebrew. So let's leave it at Red Sea. Now Josephus stated in Antiquities, we jump ahead where we left off, that Mount Sinai was near the city of Madian, whose ruins are near the town of Elbad, near the Saudi Arabian west coast. Hence the crossing point of Israel over the Red Sea was not from any of the beaches near the Gulf of Suez, but over the Red Sea's Gulf of Aqaba. That's more corroboration. Evidently today's Nuweiba Peninsula, where underwater searchers, very interesting, just recently discovered the remains of chariot parts, wheels, axles, carriages, horses' bones, hooves, and human bones on the Egyptian and the Arabian sides of the Red Sea of the Gulf of Aqaba, evidently from the pursuing Egyptian forces who were destroyed by the waters. Now the Egyptians had a superior chariot army. They had specifically designed wheels and a platform that had a spearman or a bowman on it, and that's why they were able to defeat larger forces and kept their reign of power in that particular area. And here are some of the pictures. Here's a chariot wheel here, others covered by algae and coral. 6 of the 7 images are of wheel-shaped objects lying on the Red Sea floor off Nuweiba Peninsula. The size and construction is comparative to 13th century BC Egyptian chariot wheels. Evolving Chariot Wheels in the 18th Dynasty by James K. Hoffmeyer is the writer on this, a researcher. The wheel on the upper left had a sheet metal covering resembling electrum, which is a mixture of gold and silver, which was used to cover a wooden wheel on an Egyptian officer's chariot. Sometimes the pharaoh went with him, a young pharaoh. And there's that upper left-hand corner. Notice that the wheel has a rim, 4 spokes, a hub, and a hole in the hub through which the axle extended. This is less coral on it due to the metallic covering. The rest of the wheels on the top row have more coral on them due to greater exposure directly to the wood. Take a look at that again. These other wheels. Egyptian design, though. Nevertheless, the coral is retained in circular shape. The third picture is duplicated with the lines of a wheel superimposed upon it. Metal detectors were used to scan the wheels, and the scans were posited to metal in the circular shape of a wheel, most likely the inner bronze parts. 2 of the images in the second row show chariot assemblies standing on end. The last picture on the second row is a drawing of a 4-spoke chariot found in the Egyptian tomb from the same time period, showing the same design as the ones underwater. Go back and look at that. There's the picture, and these are the axles. See, there's superimposed picture there. And scuba diving, because you get up much closer and be able to look at it. So this guy's books are good to get to corroborate the fact that these were Egyptian design. and right at the crossing that would be most feasible for a great number of people. Numerous 4-, 6-, and 8-spoke wheels are found here in the Gulf. They were only used at the same time during the 18th dynasty of 1446 when the Exodus took place. The Bible said that all the chariots of Egypt and 600 choice chariots or gold veneered models were in the army pursuing God's people. It is speculated there were 20,000 chariots destroyed that day. Note that human and horse bones, even hooves, were also discovered at the crossing site. Wow, here's some, I guess these are from satellite images. This Google image shows the crossing site at the large beach on the upper left and the real Sinai in the lower left in Saudi Arabia and Madian. So the upper left corner crossing. And there's the Mount Sinai Peak. You can go online and probably get a clearer picture of this. This is a copy of that. Which today, this mountain is named Jebel el-Nuwars in the Arabic. This mountain is at 8,000 feet, the tallest mountain in the region, and forms a natural amphitheater enclosing an area of 5,000 acres, extending into the foothills, sufficient to accommodate more than 2 million people with flocks and herds. The entire summit of the mountain is blackened as if burned by intense heat. You can click on this and get the story from the Bible. This is the Exodus route. We just repeated earlier. Exodus 19:18 talks about completely in smoke, the Lord descended upon it in fire. It's blackened top now, evidence of that. Altar at the foot of the mountains, 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And we have those at the mountain bottom, at the foot. Skeptics insist too many to travel through the wilderness or occupy Canaan. Great population would have caused great conflict with other peoples in their sojourn because they would have had to overrun the territories of other peoples because there's too many of them. That's a good argument, or is it? Well, here's a wide, flat road right now with a modern road on it that could easily have accommodated 3 million Exodus Jews if there were that many. Hasn't changed that much. Moses promised the king of Edom and his people would not cut through the territory of the Edomites, and they didn't have to. They stayed on the king's highway, Numbers 20:17. This highway was an immensely wide path of a broad plain, miles wide, which easily could accommodate Israel's millions, so that they could bypass Edomite territory. There wasn't a problem. So there was no need to form a narrow column of people stretching for hundreds of miles, which wouldn't make that either feasible, nor for any Israelite to go to near Edomite territory. They could just spread out for miles, going thousands abreast, straight up and down the broad plain of the King's Highway. Just do a little more research. It's a modern highway that runs near the ancient King's Highway. See? The eastern shore of the Gulf of Suez and the wilderness of Shur, North Arabia, were wide open plains as well. In only one section did Scripture indicate that the people of Israel had to conduct their passage in stages because of the narrow terrain between the wilderness of Sin and the wilderness of Sinai. The rest of the sojourn was wide open terrain. We have some scriptural passages on that. Tablets discovered 14th century BC, about the time of the Exodus. People dwelling in Canaan to the Egyptian Pharaoh, saying these people have invaded their territory. Huh? Was there an Exodus? Significant enough for the plea of the people to say, we got a whole nation of people, millions coming at us. Help us, see? Egypt had influence over Canaan, and they basically that was their territory. The move of a significant number of Hebrews to Canaan is corroborated by the victory stele of Pharaoh, Merneptah, which was in his funerary temple in Thebes, commemorating his conquests in Canaan about 1210 BC, from which was translated as follows. Israel is laid waste, the sea does not. Although the tone of this inscription is evidently Pharaoh's self-serving hyperbole, his inscription nevertheless confirms the existence of the nation Israel. So skeptics can't say, "Oh, it didn't exist." There's a archaeological discovery, this stele. And although the tone, was self-serving, implying a nation of significantly large population to have an inscription made about their departure and removal from Egypt. At the same time, the influx of the Apiru, Hebrews, in Canaan, there was discovered archaeological evidence of an explosion of the population in the hills of the west bank of the Jordan River between Hebron and Shechem, an area of about 2,600 square miles. In that area alone, the number of villages increased from 23 to 114, with the population jumping from approximately 14,000 to 38,000 in a century's time, implying much more than a high birth rate, but pointing to the Hebrews moving into the land, and in the villages there were discovered trappings typical of Hebrew lifestyles. Well, there you go. Consider that today 1.5 million Palestinians occupy a tiny corner of the land that God promised to give Abraham and his descendants, corroborating the conclusion that the population of more than 2 million emerging from Egypt, the Israelites, was not out of the question. Very feasible, relative to being too large to fit into the promised land as some contended. So, we've got archaeological discoveries that show that it possibly happened, more than likely. Now, objectors also insist that the organizational structure stipulated in Scripture for Israel is too limited to manage millions of people. Well, Israel was well organized, and we look to Scripture to see that. If Exodus 18:24 is taken at face value, is workable for 2+ million people. Moses is leader to make a simple announcement to follow up with Joshua's presenting it in writing to the newly appointed upper echelon of leaders, so they had an organization of leadership. We see how it breaks down. It's well organized, better than most countries. Now, okay, did we have that many people? Well, I did my own little estimated popular growth of ancient Israel and Egypt. But people say that, well, it's unrealistically high for them to grow for such a small number to start off with. But the report of the longevity of people in ancient times, implying much more time for childbearing, and the repeated prediction of Israel becoming a great nation, implying a great population in those days, corroborates what the book of Exodus stipulated. Each couple estimated to have an average of one child every 2 years over a period of 28 childbearing years. People live a lot longer there, ages 16 to 44. 14 total children per couple. This translates to an average of one child per individual each 4 years, with an average lifespan of 100 years per individual. Let me take a drink of water here. All right, so I did this chart. You can check it out. I just did like an average it out, and it, of course, the average lifespan of 100 years, and then 16 to 44 lifespan for childbearing for the women, and you come up with a gradually increasing. See this last column here, gradually increasing. Then it gets larger and larger. 104. See? People die, so they don't, and they go past childbearing years. So we get 96,000 after 200 years. About 400 years they were there. 215 years, right. Total 400 years in Canaan and Egypt combined. That's right. Forgot about that. So you got 195,838. Average number of descendants per individual in 216 years. So a descendant has so many children. Then his children have children, and his children have children. So about 200,000 per individual descendants. So you got about 195,838 plus 12 minimum number of male descendants of Jacob of childbearing age who arrived in Egypt. See, so you have 12 times 195,838, because it starts